Last month in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, a white supremacist shot and killed 6 Sikh worshippers in the Oak Creek Gurdwara. Satwant Singh Kaleka, let me say that again. Satwant Singh Kaleka was the founder of the Gurdwara. His picture is on my far right. You'll see in the charts here. Mr. Kaleka fought off the gunman with a butter knife, which gave others in the temple time to seek refuge. Mr. Kaleka leaves behind his wife, 2 sons, and 3 grandchildren. Mr. Kaleka's son, Amardeep, and nephew, Kanwardeep, are with us today, and our deepest condolences go to them. Pramrabjit Kaur was a deeply religious woman. Her picture is next to Mr. Kaleka's. On the day of the shooting, she was at the Gurdwara for her daily morning prayers. Mrs. Kaur was devoted to her 2 sons, Kamaljit Singh Saini and Harpreet Singh Saini, working long hours so that they could go to school. Kamaljit and Harpreet are here today. We will hear from Harpreet later in the hearing. You and your family are in our thoughts and prayers. Prakash Singh Rathore has been a priest at the temple for 6 years. His picture is the next one over. He immigrated to the United States in 2006 and was finally able to bring his wife and 2 children to the United States just 2 months ago after 6 years of separation. Ranjit Singh immigrated to the United States in 1997. His picture is the next one over. Mr. Singh was a priest who played the tubla, an Indian drum, during religious ceremonies and mentored young people at the temple. He is survived by a wife and 3 children. Sita Singh, Ranjit Singh's younger brother, immigrated to the United States in 1993. He was a priest at the temple, where he led morning prayers every day at 5 a.m. His picture is next to his brothers. Sita Singh is survived by his wife and 4 children. Suveg Singh Kutra, who was 82 years old, was a farmer from India who immigrated to the United States with his wife 8 years ago to join his son and daughter-in-law. Mr. Kutra's picture is the next one over. He leaves behind a wife, 5 children, and 7 grandchildren. The family of each of the 6 victims has submitted written testimony, and with unanimous consent, that testimony will be part of the record. Oak Creek, Wisconsin Police Department Lieutenant Brian Murphy responded to the Gurdwara shooting and was shot himself 9 times at close range. His picture is on my far left. When other officers arrived at the scene, Lieutenant Murphy urged them to help other shooting victims before they helped him. Thankfully, Lieutenant Murphy, a 21-year veteran of the Oak Creek Police Force, is expected to recover from his injuries. Sadly, the shooting in Oak Creek, Wisconsin was not an isolated incident. More than 6,600 hate crimes were reported to the FBI in the calendar year 2010, the most recent year for statistics. And a 2005 study by the Bureau of Justice Statistics believes that even those crimes that are reported are just a fraction of those that actually occur. In the week following the Oak Creek shooting, there were numerous attacks on mosques, including a mosque burned to the ground in Joplin, Missouri, a shooting at a mosque in my home state in Martin Grove, Illinois, while 500 worshipers were praying inside, and an unidentified perpetrator throwing an improvised explosive device at an Islamic school, again in Illinois and Lombard, during a prayer service. According to the Justice Department, the increase in discrimination against mosques since 2010, quote, reflects a regrettable increase in anti-Muslim sentiment. At the same time, African Americans continue to be targeted by a vast majority of racially motivated hate crimes. Jewish Americans continue to be victims of religiously motivated hate crime. Latinos are the victims of most ethnically motivated hate crimes, and hundreds of LGBT Americans are victims of violent hate crimes every single year. 3 years ago, I was honored to stand next to President Obama in the East Room of the White House when he signed into law the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crime Prevention Act. Today, we'll hear about the Justice Department's efforts to use this authority to investigate and prosecute these crimes. But what are we doing to prevent hate crimes in the first instance? Are sufficient resources being devoted to combating the threat of violent domestic extremism and to protect those who are vulnerable? The numbers speak for themselves. According to a study by the New America Foundation and Syracuse University, 18 people have been murdered in 10 right-wing terrorist attacks since 9/11. 17 have been killed in 4 attacks by violent Muslim extremists. And since 9/11, 15 domestic extremists have acquired chemical or biological weapons that they intended to use in attacks. As one public FBI report warned, quote, "Right-wing terrorists pose a significant threat due to their propensity for violence." Well, since 9/11, Congress has held dozens of briefings on the threat posed by al-Qaeda and its affiliates. This is the first hearing in many years on the threat of violent domestic extremism. Of course, absolutely, we have to continue our efforts to defeat al-Qaeda, but we can't ignore the threat of homegrown, non-Islamic terrorism. In recent weeks, we have been reminded that many around the world do not appreciate America's unique approach to hate speech and blasphemy. So let me be clear. Under our Constitution, we punish criminal acts, not free speech, no matter how offensive or hateful it might be. But our leaders still have a responsibility to speak out against hate speech. That's what President Obama did in condemning the anti-Islamic movie that sparked the protests in the Muslim world. And that's what President George W. Bush did. It was 6 days after 9/11, 11 years ago this week, that President Bush visited Islamic Center in Washington, D.C. to make it clear our fight was with al-Qaeda, not American Muslims. President Bush said, quote, "The face of terror is not the true faith of Islam. That's not what Islam is all about. Islam is peace," end of quote. Now, I had plenty of political differences with President Bush, and I've said that on many occasions. But I believe that his leadership as president helped to stop an anti-Muslim backlash after 9/11 because he spoke out so clearly, so quickly. I'm sorry to say that many political leaders are failing to follow his example and the example of President Obama. One recent example, several members of the House of Representatives have gone so far as to question the loyalty of American Muslims serving in the Obama administration. Now, this kind of rhetoric is inconsistent with our heritage as a diverse nation of immigrants. Most Americans realize our diversity is our strength. They don't question the religious background of their fellow citizens. When Lieutenant Murphy rushed into a hail of bullets at the Oak Creek Gurdwara, he wasn't questioning first the religion of the victims. He knew they needed help, and he responded. In conclusion, I hope this hearing will redouble our efforts to combat the threat of domestic extremism and to take whatever steps are necessary to protect the vulnerable in America. Some would argue we shouldn't be discussing our shortcomings in public while there are protesters around the world burning American flags. They claim that America might show weakness when it acknowledges its mistakes. I couldn't disagree more. America is strongest when we lead by example. We are a country that can look ourselves squarely in the mirror and admit that there is still work to be done to secure the promise of equal justice for all.